Good morning and welcome to Let the Bible Speak. My name is Alex Meredith. I'm the minister for the Marquette Church of Christ and your host for today's program. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm again really glad to be back. I was back last week. Feels very natural coming back in, and love being able to share scripture with you each Sunday morning. So we are going to be continuing our series through Matthew's Gospel. We're going to be picking up in Matthew chapter 14. And today we're going to be looking at a couple of stories, events that happen. They're seaside stories, by the way. They happen either by the sea or in the sea. And I really think that they will change your perspective on faith. I really do. Because I know that when and this happens every week, by the way, when I study these things myself, it affects me. And I think in some way that has to happen in order for me to come to you on a given Sunday and say, hey, this is what's going on and this is the way it is. I think I have to first experience that to be able to even tell you about it truthfully. So I know it affected me, and I hope it affects you also. Now, if you've ever experienced grief, real, genuine grief, and I know probably all of you have, you know what that first feeling is like when you first hear the news, when you first, or even in the coming days afterwards. What do you want to do in those next few days? You probably don't want to do much of anything, and you probably want to go by yourself somewhere and just everybody leave you alone. You isolate yourself, and you just need time to process what's actually happened. Well, John the Baptist, in the beginning of Matthew chapter 14, it goes to the story of John the Baptist, and it mentions that he has died. What happened there is that John the Baptist spoke out against Herod. This is Herod Antipas at the time. And Herod Antipas had married his sister-in-law, and John the Baptist, rightly, he said, hey, you shouldn't do that. And especially Herodias, Herod Antipas' wife, got very upset at that, and he was arrested. And through a series of strange events, he ended up being killed. And so Jesus just finds out about this. And remember, John the Baptist is important to Jesus for two reasons. One reason, and maybe primarily, he is the prophetic precursor to Jesus' ministry. He was the one prophesied about at the end of Malachi, the messenger that would come before the presence of the Lord. And that's clearly what Matthew and Luke in particular connect him to. He's the one who makes straight in the wilderness, the highways for our God. So John the Baptist was very critical in that sense, but also they were related. They knew each other for a long, long time. And so here Jesus has a close relative of his, and somebody very important to his own ministry, and he finds out that he dies. And what does Jesus want to do? Well, he just wants to be left alone. Remember, the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. As human as Jesus was, he was experiencing the same kind of grief that we would experience. So he wants to be left alone, okay? And that is what starts off this story, this first seaside story about the Sea of Galilee. We're going to read from Matthew chapter 14, beginning in verse 13. And this is that famous story of Jesus feeding the 5,000. And by the way, when it says 5,000, that's just the number of men that were there. That was just their way of counting. Depending on the time of day, there may have been a significantly larger number of people there, including many women and maybe many children. I don't know, 12,000, more, 15, who knows? But Jesus feeding several thousand people. So look at this. This is Matthew 14, beginning in verse 13. Now when Jesus heard this, that's the death of John the Baptist, he withdrew from there in a boat to a desolate place by himself. But when the crowds heard it, they followed him on foot from the towns. He had been teaching to these massive crowds, healing the sick and everything else, so no wonder they were following him. When he went ashore, he saw a great crowd, and he had compassion on them and healed their sick. Now, when it was evening, the disciples came to him and said, now pay attention to this, They said, "This is a desolate place, and the day is now over. Send the crowds away to go into the villages and buy food for themselves." But Jesus said, "They need not go away. You give them something to eat." They said to him, "We have only 5 loaves here and 2 fish." And he said, "Bring them here to me." Then he ordered the crowds to sit down on the grass, and taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, he looked up to heaven and said a blessing. Then he broke the loaves and gave them to the disciples, and the disciples gave them to the crowds. And they all ate and were satisfied, and they took up 12 baskets full of the broken pieces left over. And those who ate were about 5,000 men, besides women and children. It is so remarkable here to me that Jesus, in verse 14, you notice he just wants to be left alone by himself, but when he sees the great crowds, he transforms that sorrow, that grief, he transforms that into compassion. I think this really speaks to Jesus' character and the character of God. He was not going to allow this inconvenience to stop him from caring for the people who need help. Now, there are lots of little points to be made here. First of all, we see these echoes of Moses. If you might remember in the story of Moses, way back in the book of Exodus, Moses was instrumental in helping lead the people of Israel out of slavery in Egypt, the crossing of the Red Sea and such. But when they actually get to the wilderness, there's a very practical problem that arises, which is they need something to eat, and there are tons of them. What are they going to do? Well, God provides for them the entire time they're in the wilderness by providing them most of the time with manna, which is described as a powdery-like bread almost that is there on the grass and at the sunrise, like dew. And so bread is very much associated with the Mosaic tradition, and here Jesus is providing bread for everybody, enough bread for everybody, right? And by the way, one of the things that happened in the days of Moses is that they didn't have meat often at all, but they did a couple times. And so you have the 2 fish. There are echoes there, and I don't think that's a coincidence. Jesus is often in the Gospels portrayed as this better Moses in some sense. We don't need to go too much in detail to that, but there are definitely some callbacks there that you're supposed to notice. And then you have, after the people eat, and they're given more than enough, they take up 12 baskets of leftovers. I don't think that's an accident. And there are lots of different ways to interpret this. One way of looking at it is God was providing for the 12 tribes of Israel, the 12 tribes that descended from Jacob, from Israel, thus the children of Israel. So that's one way of looking at it. He's providing for them through the Messiah. Another way of looking at it might be by thinking about the disciples. There were 12 disciples, and there are these leftover baskets, and that's for them. He's not just going to care for the people who immediately obviously need help. He's going to care for the workers as well. And I think there's a way of looking at this where you could say maybe it actually means both of these things. It's what's called a plenary interpretation of the passage. Okay, so there are these 12 leftover baskets. Here's what I really want to get at, though. Who's the main character in this story? Now, the obvious answer is Jesus. Jesus is the one who transforms this meager amount of food into enough to feed everybody. And there's definitely something to be said about the power that's demonstrated here, but I really think the main character or characters in the story are the disciples. So the disciples, remember, they've been witnessing what Jesus has done. Jesus, this compassionate man, this man who has helped so many people out of the plights that they found themselves in, and they're learning from him, and they're learning to try to have compassion on other people and to be helpful. They want to be helpful. That's the big thing. Because what happens when it becomes later in the day, they look out on the crowds and they say, Lord, this is a desolate place. Let them go out into the villages and buy food for themselves. All they're trying to do is just be helpful in the best way that they know how. But the problem is they're limited, right? They're limited. Now, we experience this a lot in the church, and we want to be helpful. We want to do what's best. We want to help the people around us that are in need. We want to help the church. We want to help expand God's kingdom, like we talked about last week, right? We want to do all these things, but we don't exactly always know how or the best direction to take. And even if we do know the best direction to take, it's not as if we have the power to snap our fingers and just make whatever we want happen. We can pray for God's agency, but ultimately our capacity and our power to affect the world around us is to some degree limited. So you look at verse 17 here. Well, and this is following verse 16. Jesus says, they don't need to go away. You give them food. You be helpful. And what do they say? They say, well, Jesus, all we've got 5 loaves of bread. We've got 2 fish. What are we supposed to do? We so often find ourselves in that situation. We feel like there's this calling on our hearts and God wants us to do this important thing. And we look at our circumstances and we go, well, who am I? My education's not enough. I don't have the financial resources. I don't have the skills or the talent or the know the right people, whatever. But then what happens? God, in his infinite capacity, takes those 5 loaves of bread and 2 pieces of fish and turns them into enough to accomplish the mission. So this actually speaks to the role of Christianity and the role of Christians in God's service. Our role as Christians is to faithfully give whatever we have, regardless of what that amount is. You think that God has called you to go and help this person, but you don't have enough food, money, whatever, time, whatever it is. God has called you to go share the gospel with this person or that person, but you don't think you have the skills, whatever. We have all kinds of excuses. Your job is just to faithfully go where God has called you, to give whatever you can, even if that's just 5 loaves of bread and 2 pieces of fish, even if that's all you've got, regardless of how much it is, give whatever you can and God will take care of the rest. And this is, by the way, obviously not necessarily or even primarily about money. Following that, in Matthew chapter 14, verse 22, we have another seaside story. And I say seaside, this actually happens in the Sea of Galilee, so sea story, whatever you want to call it. Matthew 14, starting in verse 22, this is going to be the story of Jesus and Peter also walking on the water. So listen to this. Immediately, he made the disciples get into the boat and go before him to the other side, while he dismissed the crowds. And after he had dismissed the crowds, he went up on the mountain by himself to pray. When evening came, he was there alone. But the boat, by this time, was a long way from the land, beaten by the waves, for the wind was against them. And in the 4th watch of the night, he came to them, walking on the sea. But when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified and said, "It is a ghost!" And they cried out in fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them, saying, "Take heart, it is I, do not be afraid." And Peter answered him, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." He said, "Come." So Peter got out of the boat and walked on the water and came to Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, he cried out, "Lord, save me!" Jesus immediately reached out his hand and took hold of him, saying to him, "O you of little faith, why did you doubt?" And when they got into the boat, the wind ceased, and those in the boat worshipped him, saying, "Truly, you are the Son of God." Just as before, lots of small points to make here real quick. First of all, Jesus is not a centaur. He is not a kraken. He is not a vampire. Now, I know this may sound like it's coming totally out of left field. The reason I say this is because in the ancient world, there was this very common and widespread belief, and it was very much influenced by Jewish mysticism, that within the sea, whether the Sea of Galilee, the Dead Sea, Mediterranean Sea, whatever, within the sea, especially at night, it laid host to all kinds of supernatural, mystical creatures, from krakens to centaurs to vampires, werewolves, whatever else. So that's why I think the first reaction of the disciples when they see this, the silhouette of this figure walking on the water, they say, "It's a ghost! It's a ghost! It's a ghost!" They don't know what it is. They're terrified that some being is coming to get them. So that's why they respond to that. Now, another thing to point out here is that many of the disciples, if you might recall, are professional fishermen, right? They're professional fishermen. So you would think that they would have a little bit more control over what's going on. Now, the Sea of Galilee is known, both back then and today still, is known for, and it's kind of in this weird geographical region where the air coming up and down the mountains nearby is really affecting the weather patterns right there in the middle of the sea. And so you can have a very sudden and violent shift in weather. And that seems to be what happens here. And so the fact that these professional fishermen start to lose control, this was really bad. This was not some ordinary light, make you woozy kind of storm. They are in fear for their lives. And this is the kind of waters that Jesus is walking on and that Peter ends up walking on. Which brings us to the last point. Once again, who's the main character? Jesus obviously does something incredible in walking on the water. But I think the focus of the story is actually on Peter. Now, Peter, what does he do? Well, he does what so many of us do. He approaches God with this mixture of both faith, and it took a lot of faith, right? He said, "Lord, if it really is you, tell me to come to you on the water and I will come." And to his credit, he steps out of the boat and he steps onto the water and he walks on the water. By the power of God, of course, right? Now, he approaches Jesus with both faith, yes, but also with fear. It's a mixture of both faith and fear. And notice what happens. At first, Peter's focused on Jesus. That's when he's able to walk on the water. He's focused on the object of his faith. But as soon as that focus shifts from the object of his faith over to the source of his fear, the wind, what happens? He falls. As soon as we shift our attention from the object of our faith, Jesus Christ, to the source of our fear, that's when things go wrong. In Hebrews chapter 12, I'm reminded of this passage, partway through verse 1. It reads, "Let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us." And how does it say we should do this? Fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of faith. And by the way, that's the NIV rendition of it. Like the phrase that it has there, the fixing your eyes on Jesus. That's very accurate. Now, when you look at both of these stories here, you think about the feeding of the 5,000 or the 12,000. You think about Jesus and then Peter walking on the water. What do they show us? Well, first of all, they show us that faith is a battle. And for many of us, our experience of faith has been just that. It's been a battle. It has been for me. I would be shocked to hear about anybody who's of any sufficient age that has just had smooth sailing all the way through. I don't really think that happens to many people, if any. For the vast majority of us, if not all of us, faith is a battle. And we are constantly battling the forces that stand against us, those spiritual forces, and just plain old worldly influence and the desires of the flesh and everything else. We're battling those forces. We're battling complacency. But if we trust God through the hardest times that we experience, if we put our trust in Him, if we give Him our lives, what happens? Well, if we do that, God is able to do some really extraordinary things through you, regardless of what circumstances you find yourself in. You can serve your local church. You can share the gospel with people who do not know it. You can give to the poor. You can lead your family to holiness, to submit to God, to do His will. That is the way in which we bring forward our 5 loaves of bread and 2 pieces of fish. That is our contribution to the kingdom. And watch what God does with it. We might think that these are small things. We are very often tempted to say, well, all I can do is X, all I can do is Y, all I can do is Z. And we think that those are small things. And you know what? Maybe they are. Maybe they actually are small things. But what can God do with 5 loaves of bread and 2 pieces of fish? What can he do with that small thing? What happened to the mustard seed? Remember last week? That mustard seed, it turned into a tree. We have a member of our church. I won't share his name. Won't embarrass him. But we have a member of the church that's been wheelchair bound for quite a while now, and he's got a number of health issues that have affected him for quite some time, and he's had a fair amount of tragedy in his life as well. He's had quite the experience. And you know what? What he could do is he could say, I've had enough. I've had all these things happen to me. I've tried to live faithfully, and what have I gotten out of it? Well, I've got a bum leg and all these personal tragedies that, again, I won't share too many details there, but he could look at his life and he could say, this is my situation. I'm just worn out and I'm done. He could use all those things, those negative experiences, as an excuse. And he totally could. But you know what he chose to do instead? He said, well, I can't give as much as I used to anymore, but I can still do some. And I'll tell you what, he's had a dramatic effect on the Marquette Church in the last couple of years. Maybe he feels he can do less than he used to be able to do, but I'll tell you what, God is doing amazing, remarkable things through him, because even though it's just 5 loaves of bread and 2 pieces of fish, he is faithfully giving those 5 loaves of bread and 2 pieces of fish. God can do a lot with just a little. And that really changes your perspective on a lot of things. First of all, it changes the way that you see yourself, right? Because like I said, you can do that to yourself. You can say, well, I'm in this horrible situation. I don't have much means or skill or ability or whatever. And we can say, I don't really know that I'm of much use to the church. I'm just going to stand back and let the professionals handle it, right? Well, no, don't do that. First of all, God has called the entirety of this church, not just the professionals, not just the elders, not just the preachers. He's called all of us to participate in the growth and the manifestation of his kingdom in the world. Secondly, even if you can just contribute some small thing, and again, I'm not talking about money. If you can contribute just some small thing, some small service, if you can be kind to your neighbor, if you can help those in need, if you can spend time with somebody who is lonely, right? If you can do these small things, watch what God can do with those little things. He can turn it into something huge. And by the way, I'll just add something here. I didn't have this written down, but when you look at Hebrews 11 and you see the way that the great heroes of faith cooperated with God's plan, oftentimes they didn't even realize, even by the end of their life, they didn't realize the magnitude of what God was doing through them. It wasn't until well after their life that the effect of their life was made manifest. So you may not even see the fruit of all of your labors even before your own death, and that's okay. God can still do great things through that. Faith ultimately is not about how much you bring to the table, because really the whole message of the gospel is that none of us bring enough, right? That's why the cross is necessary, because none of us bring enough bread and fish to the table. It's about what God can do with the little that you do bring. In Matthew 14:31, I'll challenge you with this. What does Jesus say to Peter after he falls? He says, "Oh, you of little faith, why did you doubt?" I think all of us need to be told that, or maybe have that yelled at us every now and then. "Oh, you of little faith, why did you doubt?" So step out of the boat. Fix your eyes on Christ. Go feed the crowds with whatever crumbs that you have, and bear witness to the power of God. Believe in Jesus. Follow Jesus. Make your soul sanctified. Cleanse yourself of sin and baptism. And then go tell other people about it. And watch what God can do when you do that. Now, one last thing, Philippians chapter 4, starting in verse 19, Paul, as he sits in prison, is talking about how no matter what your circumstance is, God will give you everything that you need. Paul believed even in prison, even though his life might be soon taken from him, he believed that he had everything that he needed. Look what he shares here in Philippians 4:19. And my God will supply every need of yours according to his riches in glory in Christ Jesus. To our God and Father be glory forever and ever. Amen. I think sometimes we need to alter what we think we need, which is sufficient for us. Before we go, I want to tell you about some of the resources that we have to offer to all of our viewers. First of all, we have a 7-part workbook program, our Bible correspondence course published by the World Bible School. You can participate in this either by mail or online. If you want to participate by mail, just send us a note either online or by mail. The address will be there in just a minute. Let us know that you want to participate. You can also sign up online and do it virtually. Go to worldbibleschool.org and you'll be paired up with a tutor that will walk you through the program. If you don't have a Bible, you need one, and we'd be glad to send you one totally free of charge. This is ESV translation. It's the same translation we typically use here on the program on Let the Bible Speak. Our address is up there on the screen for you. You can contact us by mail at P.O. Box 372. That is in Marquette, zip code 49855. You can also find a lot of this information, including service times for local churches and contact information at letthebiblespeak.net. There's also a link there to watch a bunch of old episodes if you'd like to do that. If you ever want to see an episode or listen to an episode and you don't catch it, those are published on YouTube. They're also published in podcast form, just the audio of it, on Spotify, Audible, iHeartRadio, all these different apps you see up on the screen. Just search Let the Bible Speak UP. I want to thank you so much for joining me this morning. Next week, we're going to be talking about being transformed from the inside out, looking at Matthew chapter 15, verses 10 through 20. Feel free to get ahead and read that ahead of time. That will help you when we actually do dig into it. In the meantime, I hope that you have a wonderful week. May God bless you in all that you do for his kingdom.